The night belongs to us. We will bathe in their blood and relish their screams.
Hi everybody, I'm Mark White. I'm the former Managing Director and Project Lead for Southampton Vampire by Night. So in this video I'm going to talk about people and try to give some advice, and also to kind of talk about the pitfalls and things that went wrong and things that went right when dealing with people. So as a project lead or project manager, at some point you're going to need to deal with somebody, somebody else. So it could be that you're looking for a paid service. It could be that you're asking someone to come on board on your project and work for free. It could be that they're coming on board for the project because of future advertisement. They love the project, passionate about it or something like that. But at some point people will be working alongside you with the project, and how you deal with those people and interact with them is incredibly important. So one of the biggest mistakes I made on the project was I took things personally. So the project for me was, I was incredibly passionate about it. It was like a baby to me. It was my legacy, my thing, the thing that I wanted to be remembered by, and all of this. I've discussed these feelings in motivation in a previous video, but basically for me this was a really big deal. So when dealing with somebody else who then ultimately let me down, I took it to heart. I felt it was a personal slight against me, that I would never do that to somebody else. So the fact that someone did that to me was a complete lack of respect, and yeah, it was hard to deal with it. So some examples of this would be, as I spoke about in a previous video talking about downtime plot lines and stuff like that, there was individuals that had responded to a post to say that they were interested in writing plot for the game. They knew that it wasn't going to be paid work, it was work that would then, their plots in the game would be advertised as their plots, and they got given a part of the city that they could then write their own stories in and stuff like that, with minimal kind of supervision and poking and stuff. They just had to follow a structure when it came to the actual writing and delivery of that plot line, but the content of it was reasonably free reign to some extent. We didn't want world-ending kind of explosion-y plot stuff and magic items that made people immune to death or something appearing in the game, but it was you could do what you wanted, really. So each of these individuals I spoke to for probably about between 2 to 4 hours at the start, to explain how things work, to introduce them into the project, to thank them for being involved, and I thought that these individuals were committed, because they said that they were committed and that they had the free time and that willing to give up that free time for the project. And then basically what happened was that I left to go on holiday, and I took a break for the project. I think it was for 2 weeks, and when I came back, not one of the individuals working on those plot lines had done anything. The deadlines had been missed, there was nothing. So I had to reach out to each of them individually and ask why, and try to motivate them and ask if they were still committed, to which 90% of them said they still were, and that they just had things going on in their life, and in the nicest possible way there was excuse after excuse after excuse. So I took all that on board, further conversations with them, see what I can do to help, and then eventually what happened was that each of these individuals, it came to a kind of an end when I just, after deadlines had been missed multiple times, I just outright said, at this point, I don't believe that you're committed to this, and it's probably best that, we kind of go our separate ways. And or they said the same in return to me, etc. And what basically happened was, I think in the end, I think I said 30, but I think it was about 20. It was between 20 and 30 individuals that were involved in the plot in one way or another, and not a single one delivered. And some of these were people that I thought were very close friends of mine, people that I thought I had a really good rapport with, and at no point did any of them just say, "Look, mate, I know I committed to this, but I've got to pull away." They didn't say that until the very end. So even though they knew that their commitment to this wasn't as much, and that maybe they didn't enjoy this style of plot writing, etc., etc., they didn't say that until the very end, and that meant that we went through months of wasted conversations, etc. So in hindsight, there were some things that I learnt towards the end of the project, which if I'd have used at the start when dealing with individuals, would have made a huge difference. So one of the most important things you can do is you have to not only engage with that individual and get them committed onto the project, but then you have to work with them. Don't allow someone to go off all by themselves and do something and only come and actually have interactions with you during, those kind of, whatever it is, the deadline meetings and stuff like that. What's best is if you have constant engagement with them in small ways, like just a friendly phone call, just to talk through what you're up to, that kind of thing before the deadline. Then if they have any issues or something like that, then they can talk to you about it. When we started to actually have team meetings once a week, it made a huge difference in the productivity, because the individuals were getting together on Zoom. We were having these team meetings, going through what everybody's been done. People were showcasing the work they've made, and if people missed deadlines, everybody knew. And it was one of those things where, as long as you had some people that were being productive, everybody else felt like they should be productive because they were surrounded by people that were. So they felt that they should, because otherwise they'd look bad. It's a motivational tool to bring people together. Now, it's risky in some regard, because if you have a week where nobody's done anything and the next week nobody's done anything, at that point it makes the people that are being productive feel like, what's the point of being productive? Because if I'm doing all this work and nobody else is, I'm going to take a break because everybody else seems to be taking a break. So one of the things you can do to counteract that is to talk to the individuals before the team meeting to see where they're at, and to kind of say you're using that because you want to plan out the meeting. And if you know that there's been a week or month or whatever it is you wish to do your team meeting scheduled to, if you know there's been a period of time where nothing's been done, then plan your meetings to talk about something else, or talk about the overall plan of the project, or something that you've been working on and you wish to showcase it, which means everybody else is unaware that there's been a lack of productivity, but it looks like there's been movement in the project because you're presenting something that you've done. So that's a trick that I learned towards the end of the project, and my final team that I had working for me were absolutely fantastic. We did more in 6 months than we did in 2 years with that team. It was very, very productive. And there were moments where it wasn't, but the majority of the time people were just smashing out content, and it was fantastic to see. So leading up until that point, it was just an absolute slog, incredibly demotivating, and you just, as I said, I couldn't help take it personally. I lost friends over it. There's people to this day that I'm unable to talk to because I felt that the letdown that they did was just too much. I had one individual who was in charge of the world plot, and during that period of time didn't create any content, but also made it incredibly awkward and kind of refused to work with anybody else doing world plot, which meant that the project just stalled in that regard. To me, world plot is your meta plot, your overarching plot. It was the thing that everything else should link into to make the world feel real and lived in. So where that wasn't ever kind of made solid, it meant everything else that was going towards it became a little bit more watery and non-consistent. So that was a big issue. There was also that individual, as they well know, were caught on camera saying some things that were, not very polite to other members of the team, one of which was my wife. Still, to this day, it's difficult for me to kind of forgive and forget, because of, at the time, it caused me so much anguish. There was somebody else that was working on the international plot line. When I say plot line, the international system had it all revolved around an Excel document that could, when you inputted information, would update the other sheets and then produce a kind of series of results, and those results were what would be given to players. All of this we knew was achievable, but I didn't have the training understanding of Excel to do these things. There's these, I don't know what they're called, but you basically make it sort of cells, I don't know, whatever it's called. They've got something in the cells in the Excel document that when its information is inputted, it automatically updates other stuff. So this individual strung me along for a good 2 years of the project, and we had a falling out over it. We got back together, there was apologies made, and then the individual said, look, I really do want to do this for you. I made it very clear, are you 100% sure on this? You sure you want to do this? Because I know you've just, it's hurt you before. And they were like, no, I'm positive this time. I know what I need to do. I've got the time to do it. And then they ghosted me again and let me down again. Now, what these individuals didn't realise was that the project is, you have layers in a project. You have things that interact with other elements. And so when one of these main elements doesn't come about, the ripples of changes you have to make to everything else you've done is huge. And in the case of this international stuff, I had an individual that spent ages for me creating and recording 7,000 locations in Southampton. 7,000! It was a huge undertaking of work. And for me, I spent hours and hours and hours and days inputting this information as well, and so did so many others. And then for this person that was dealing with the Excel document to string us all along for that period of time, it literally wasted so much time, not only to myself, but everybody else that had been working on it. So it had huge ramifications. And these are the things. And the problem is, like I say, even to this day, I mean, I should really grow up and just get over it. But because of the way it made me feel at the time, that emotional response is something now that whenever I think of these individuals, that's the way I'm feeling. It brings up those memories of that really rough patch where my baby was basically being decimated, and it was a huge amount of stress and struggle and anguish trying to get it all back together again. So, right, so as I say, there's some examples of things that kind of went wrong and people that kind of pulled out commitment-wise and stuff like that. So, like I say, you've got the thing you can do where you kind of have more engagements with these people, and you have those team meetings, and you're clever about how you present them. That's definitely something you can do. The other thing you can do is, you do it yourself. That's always the fallback. Never have anything in your project you can't do yourself. It just means your project will take longer, but it eventually will get done. So if there's something you go, oh, that's a really good idea, and you know you can't do it or learn how to do it, then don't implement it. Or if you do implement it, add it as something that isn't in any way necessary. It's something that's just an extra. So the other way to deal with it is, so as I say, you've got to take it on yourself, those team meetings, pay. So when you pay somebody for work, and we got stung, so we lost, I think it was about £500 was stolen from us in the project. This was done by an individual who was working on our website stroke forum. So basically what happened was that we established that we wanted to have a forum which was kind of like MSN. So the idea being is that you would be able to talk to your clan, individuals within your clan, and you would do so, and as it appeared, it would appear like an image of your character and then a speech bubble and what you just said. And the next person to speak would then appear underneath you, etc. And that would be how the forums would kind of, communication on the forums would take place. In behind that was custom built images, which if AI art was out at the time would have saved us an absolute fortune, because we paid a graphic designer to make these images and then we never used any of them. So there was that. But and also with the forum, there was restrictions and stuff like that, which would allow people to click on their clan page but not click on somebody else's. There was like a out of character forum page where everybody could chat. There was one that you would go to before you joined the game, which was like a non-members kind of chat page where you could talk to individuals, ask information and stuff before joining. There was all these things, and this forum itself needed to be custom built for that to happen, because there was nothing out at the time, because don't forget this was what, 6 years ago. There was nothing at the time that was, you know, available to us. So what basically happened was this forum designer said they could do it. We went through the correct channels, so we went through places where you could apply for a gig, as in put a gig up, and people could reply to you to say it's something they could do. We had our graphic designer was the individual that had the relationship or was looking for this forum designer for us, because I had no idea how to do it. This was a mistake as well. Allowing somebody else the responsibility of having that engagement with the forum designer eventually meant, eventually what happened was the graphic designer couldn't be asked to speak to the forum designer. The forum designer had no means of contacting me and was getting nothing but stonewalled by the graphic designer. So the forum designer went, do you know what, do you know what about this project? It's not it's not that important to me, so I'm going to put it on the back burner. Then COVID hit, he lost his company, and so that was it. So that's basically what happened, because the graphic designer was dragging his ass when it came to the actual imagery that was being produced, because instead of them coming up with multiple images for us to choose from, they would produce one and then we would have to then change and chop and change that one. They were very off brief. It was a nightmare of a situation. And there was also an individual within the team that also was the one that was doing the world plot, who decided to vastly insult the graphic designer publicly in front of the rest of the team, which meant the graphic designer then just went, this is very unprofessional, and then just was incredibly difficult to work with from that point on. So in a nutshell, that engagement was terribly handled. What I should have done was from the very start I've contacted and dealt with the forum designer myself, with the graphic designer in the call, there to give advice and guidance, nothing more. I shouldn't have handed the reins over to them and given them responsibility for it, because inevitably what that led to was that the forum designer and the graphic designer just kind of ghosted and didn't produce what I needed to produce. The other thing I should have done is not introduce the graphic designer to the rest of the team. What I should have done is deal with them individually and actually presented their work to the team without them present. That way the team could have given their honest feedback. I could have filtered that before engaging with the graphic designer. By bringing the graphic designer to the meeting, what basically happened was, although there was good response in regards to we could quickly make changes, etc., it inevitably allowed a member of the team to vastly insult the graphic designer's ability and quality of work, which should never have happened. So yeah, so basically that was a bad situation. that, as I say, I could have learned from. And my advice to you would be that if you are dealing with a paid service, so you are paying somebody for their work, have the following in place before you do anything. You need to know exactly what you're after. You need to be able to communicate that to the individual you're going to be working with to a point where they can completely understand your vision. Then you need to have deadlines set in place with consequences if those deadlines aren't made. Meaning that if for any reason the individual then misses a deadline, then that causes you consequences and ramifications, that they themselves have some form of penalty in place as well. This could be, for example, you say, right, okay, what we're going to do is the project is going to cost £500. What we're going to say is, if you meet all the deadlines along the way, then you will get £500 plus maybe £100 bonus. If you miss the deadlines along the way, and let's say you missed 2 of the deadlines that we will agree upon before this takes place, then the price of the project goes down by £100, something like that. So that way, the individual has the incentive that they know they need to get the project done in time, and you have peace of mind to know that if for any reason there are delays that do have knock-on effects and costs to you, that you are saving some money that you can then divert towards those situations. Not all individuals will take this on. Some people will refuse outright to do it, but you yourself, you need to have at least something in place to protect you if there are delays in your project. Because sometimes these delays could be, we're not talking about a deadline being missed by an hour or so, we're talking a deadline being missed by a week, a month, something like that. It's happened multiple times to me. The only place that I've ever found that everybody meets their deadlines 100% is Fiverr, because they have to, because there's reviews that might have big implications, or ramifications on their work. There's Fiverr itself that will help you if these deadlines are missed, etc., in getting some of the money back. So yeah, as I say, in the end, Fiverr for me was one of the I had the best interaction with people. The only issue with Fiverr is that if you cannot give a clear guidance of what you want, unfortunately you only get so many iterations, or whatever you call it, where you can make changes. Now, if you get to the end of those changes and you still don't have what you want, it's tough luck. You've paid for that. So with Fiverr, it's very, very important that before you accept the gig, before you make that agreement, that both parties are 100% aware of what it is that needs to be produced. Don't go on there with an idea but you don't really know what it's going to look like, etc., because you get what you're given at the end. So there's that. So anyway, so I think I've gone off on loads of tangents talking about other things here, but yeah, people. So at the start I said that I took everything personally, that all of these things that were taking place, all of these mistakes, all of these interactions, these moments where I thought there was a lack of respect from people, or that, there's a big reason for that, and that is that your project is your project. So it's very important to you, but it's not so important to somebody else. Meaning that although they're motivated at the time of your conversation and they're passionate at the time of your conversation, all it takes is for a couple of things to go wrong in their life, or something to come along that's more entertaining or that would take up their time, that they think they have more fun with, and all of a sudden you go from a priority in their life to something that's just I've got to do that thing, haven't I? And then that then comes into a situation where not a lot of people like conflict. So then they try to ghost you, avoid the conversation, because what they don't want to do is to admit that they've let you down and all the rest of it. They're hoping that you'll just forget. And when you start to poke them, they then start to get very concerned and worried about that conversation, and etc., 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 which inevitably leads to a very awkward, uncomfortable, and negative phone call, message, etc. at the very end. So you just got to remember that just because you are 100% passionate about your project and you love it doesn't mean that someone that initially said they did does now. And it's not an insult against you. It's not a lack of respect. It's just they've got other things going on in their life. Things change. And some people commit to things awkwardly because they don't want to say no at the time. So they say yes when actually at the time they were thinking, oh God, I don't really want to do that. But they don't want to let you down. So they do it anyway. And then they just let you down. But so basically, yeah, when dealing with people, always remember that. Also, if you can, I mean, like I said, the project for me, I worked with a lot of my close friends during the project, and you know, I lost a lot of friends during the project because I took things personally, because I took it as an insult and a slight, and inevitably, what was the benefit of that? You know, the project never happened, it never came out, I lost a load of friends along the way, lost a load of money. It was just pointless. And if I could go back in time and redo it all, then I would just have been more, taken the emotion out of it, taken the feelings away from it, and just be, okay, no worries. Thank you for being on board when you were. But I understand everybody's got other commitments and life. You know, this is just a bit of fun, isn't it? So, you know, I understand if you don't have the time for it. And then just let them walk away. You walk away, and next time you see them, you give them a hug and a handshake, and they're still your mate. I mean, that's what should happen. You know, and that's why I think now, if I ever did another project, that would be something that I would definitely want to do, is not take things to that personal level, not lose friends over it. So yeah, the other thing, since we're talking about people, you will get people that will give you loads of praise, saying, love what you're doing, love the project, you're great, that looks cool, oh, I'm definitely committed to this, I'm definitely going to come and play this, etc., etc., etc. So you've got people like that. You've then got people that will like a lot of your project, but they will disagree about one aspect. And so what they will do is they will publicly want to know more about that particular aspect. And so you'll spend your time trying to win that individual over by explaining how the system will work, or what's going on with this certain thing, etc., etc. And then the person may agree or may disagree. And if they disagree, they will give their input of what things should be like. At which point, other people in the community will then come along, and it will be like a poll. Do they like what you've said, or do they like what this new individual said? And then you'll find that after you've got 2 or 3 comments swaying or talking about what the other person said, you'll start to sway to what their argument is. And all of a sudden you start seeing changes in your project you never planned for or wanted, because you're trying to cater to the community's kind of feedback. Now, that individual doesn't know all the other aspects of the project, how that one change that they've suggested will change so many other things. So you, as the project lead, need to be 100%. When you make a change based on community feedback, you need to do it for the right reasons, and that is because it will have a benefit to the entirety of the project. It is something that will cause the game to be better, or whatever it is you're doing to be better because of it. And if it does cause massive changes that will cause, you know, hours and hours and hours of work, then unfortunately you need to make that choice as well to say, although it's a good idea, you're not going to implement it, and you need to stand by that. Don't let yourself get bullied because you feel like, okay, well, if I don't make this change, I've lost that player. I've also lost those other people as well, which were, you know, don't do that. Do you? It's your project. You can take these suggestions on board. That comes from your team as well, people that are in the project with you. Take their suggestions on board, think about it before making a decision. Don't do what I did and start chopping and changing around because my team were suggesting stuff to me and people in the community were suggesting stuff, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that. Making a commitment to say you're going to do it and then realise actually it's going to cause you an absolute ton of work. Don't do it. Always say, let me have a think about that, and then go away, look through and see if that suggestion is going to be a really good benefit for your project or not. Okay, so that's important when you have that community engagement. So as I say, you've got people in the community that will give you just praise and love what you're doing. You're going to have people in the community that will ask you questions and wish to see changes. And then you're going to have people that just want to destroy you. They just want your project to fail. They just don't like you, or they don't like the project, or they don't like the IP you're using, or anything. It could be absolutely anything that they just take massive offence to. It could be because as you're making the project you didn't put a pride flag up, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way or a nasty way, this is just an example. You didn't put a pride flag up, so all of a sudden you have members sending you messages complaining that your project does not support. And I had that. Now, it's because I didn't have a graphic for it, and at the time, you know, it's a project, it's development, it's not a full-on company, etc. But all of a sudden I was getting messages saying that it was, and I'm not going to go into it, but it was, so you are going to get people that are just going to dislike and hate. And if your project like mine fails, you will get people that will give negative comment as well at that time. So I've already discussed this in another one when it came to mental health, but there were individuals that when the project had come to an end thought it was their opportunity to step in and to basically run me, the project and everything through the mud. And to this day I believe that the individual who did do that has no remorse for it and doesn't even realise what they did was wrong. They thought that they were protecting the community. So if that individual is watching this video, then yeah, you are not a positive influence on the community. You're a negative influence, because instead of just realising what had gone wrong and being emotionally supportive at the time, maybe sending a private message to ask your questions, but to publicly run the project through the mud with false information does not make you a positive element in the community. It's the complete opposite. And you know, that's what it is. I'm not going to engage with you any further than what was said at the time. You know what I mean? So yeah, but yeah, so as I say, you're gonna get haters, and the best thing you can do is I'm going to say the best thing you can do is don't engage with them. The problem with that is, like I felt, was they get to say their side of it, which is incorrect. And because you don't defend yourself with the correct facts, it makes what they're saying true, which isn't right. And that's why these people say with trolls on the internet, just don't engage with them, etc. Yeah, it's difficult though, because then all of a sudden the narrative is in their control, and that narrative can have ramifications. In my case, the ramifications were that I hid from the community. I couldn't go in front of a camera, without wearing a mask. I felt that that it was, yeah, it made huge changes in my life, confidence, etc. It knocked me for six, and it's because I never um, engaged. Somebody from the team engaged. That was incredibly smart, and what they said was fantastic. The way they defended things, etc. But because I never did it, because at the time I was pretty fucked up, I always felt weak because of that. But anyway, that's people. That's the engagement you have. Some people are nice, some people aren't. The trick is, I believe now in hindsight, is just to, once again, don't take it personal. Just somebody says a load of stuff that isn't true. I mean, for me, the best thing to do is to maybe bring the facts to light. Sometimes you're unable to. Companies can't show their financial records and stuff like that. You know, I don't know. It's a difficult one. Even now, I don't know what to do or what I should have said or done. I know by making these videos, it gives me an opportunity to air some of it, but I don't want to do what the individual did and drag them through the mud. It's up to them. And those others that came out of the woodworks to say horrible, nasty things, you know, I don't feel that that getting back into it over it is worth it. It's like, just, it happened, you had your say, okay, good luck, move on. But yeah, so unfortunately on this one I can't give you the advice I want to give. I wanted to come up with something wise wisdom of, oh, actually I learnt this lesson and this is the thing to do. But to this day I still don't know what to do with that, in that regard. When you have someone who's just, you know, changing the narrative and making you feel, you know, how do you deal with it? So anyway, what else is there? So yeah, people management in your project is a fucking nightmare and a skill. It's something at the start you're going to suck at, unless you've done it before. Unless you've, you know, I've ran teams of engineers in the past, etc. I've done, you know, lead spill sites, etc. around the world. And could I manage a team making a fucking vampire game? Could I fuck? Yeah, it's difficult. It's not like it is when you're at work. It's not like this is well, it depends on your project, but this wasn't a paid project. So you're literally dealing with people's free time. So yeah, it's a horrible nightmare of how you ask someone to keep on giving you their free time. Yeah, especially when that person feels like the thing they've produced isn't being valued, or that you're critiquing what they've produced, and yeah, that's an important thing. If somebody has given you their time and you've given them a scope of work that they need to produce, and they meet that scope of work but it's not exactly how you would have wanted it, shut up. Don't start to critique and change and alter what they've produced to marry up with your vision. Your vision should have been communicated with that individual before they started on it. So if you forgot, or if you weren't clear enough and they produce something that isn't to your liking but is still serviceable, as it can be part of the project, or it will move the project forwards, then do not in any way try to just shoehorn, push it around, whatever, to suit what you really want. Because all you are doing is turning around to that individual and just treating them like shit. And I really apologise to members of the team and people that were involved in the project that I did that to. Looking back now, I was an absolute dickhead at times, because I should have been clearer. I should have been like, this is what I want. I want a red apple, okay? And I want the apple to be a normal sized apple. and I want one leaf on the stem, and you know, the red that I'm looking for is kind of a you know, cherry-esque reds. You know, here's an example of the colour. You know, I'm looking for the apple to be a fresh apple. You know, all of these things I'm saying that I'm describing about this apple means that the individual who's then going to draw, work, produce, make that apple has clear understanding. They're not going to produce a blue apple that's the size of a house, that has staircases in it and windows, and they're not going to produce something that is rotten or something like that, because you've made it crystal clear what it is you want. Now, if you just say to someone, I want a red apple, and they come back and the colour isn't exactly what you wanted, and it's slightly bigger than you envisioned, and it's got 2 leaves on it, oh, God forbid, then all of a sudden, if you turn around and start ripping bits off and changing things around and making them alter little bits and bobs, it's no longer the apple they envisioned, and it's no longer, it's, yeah. So don't do it. Just literally be so clear when you have those initial engagements with people. The deadlines are set, clear understanding of what's going to happen, and then when that final product is given to you, if it really is nothing like what you initially said in that brief, okay, make changes. But if it is exactly what you said in the brief, take it as it is. Yeah, fuck. That was huge mistakes I made on that. I was so busy at the time. My brain was so all over the place with everything that was going on that I wasn't dedicating the time to really think through the elements before getting somebody else to spend their time working on it. And so what would end up happening, especially when I made bloody changes, what would happen is someone would walk away, work on something, come back to me, and then because there'd been changes in the project or because I'd had a better idea, all of a sudden we started to really change what they've done. It's just a waste of time. So yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. Take your time, plan things out, have that proper conversation before they go away. And if somebody turns around and says you're micromanaging, then that's because you're then having multiple engagements after the initial thing. Micromanaging to me is where you're basically leaning over somebody's shoulder whilst they're working, telling them exactly how to do the things they need to do. That's micromanaging to me. Giving somebody clear instructions at the start and allowing them to then interpret those instructions and produce a final product, that's just good project management. That's not micromanaging in any way. So, but anyway, that's my views on it. But yeah, just, it's important. So, so to wrap this up, because I'm probably doing another 40-minute video here, and I apologise for that. When dealing with people, there's key things you've got to remember. One is, don't take it personally. Don't make it personal. Just have it as a, you know, frank conversation in that regard. Just don't lose friends over things. Don't get emotionally fucking distraught and upset. Just don't. Next thing is, if you can afford to pay for something, pay for it. You will get far better results for somebody who is gaining something from doing it than someone who's not. You will find that you will gain more, the people that you pay or that are getting something in return for what they're delivering to you will 9 times out of 10 complete what you've asked them to do. The opposite is for those that are doing it for free. 9 times out of 10 they will not complete what you've asked them to do. Okay? So remember that. It is better if you can afford to pay for it. And if you can't afford to pay for it, expect them to not produce what you've asked them to do. And if they do produce it, be incredibly thankful for what they've produced. So the next thing is, when dealing with people, is make sure you have clear instructions. You are delivering that vision clearly, so that way there's no interpretation, etc. And that you've set clear deadlines to when you wish to have that produced. And check before those deadlines. Keep in communication with the individual. Okay. So finally on that, when dealing with people, is basically just, you're in charge. It's your project, it's your story, it's down to you. You make the final decision. Never allow people to bully you into changing your vision to suit their vision. That's important, because you will go down one hell of a rabbit hole where all of a sudden there is an aspect of your project which is causing you a lot of stress, and it's something you never wanted in the first place. Yet you're the person who's now got to deal with it, as that person's initial idea has buggered off into the sunset and you're left holding it. So, for example, we had a member of the team that suggested that when people go and do downtime plots, the ones that I discussed in a previous video, that we allow them to have a mental, social and physical outcome. Well, yeah, that was implemented. That sucked, because it added shitloads of work for everybody involved. The initial idea, the one that was going for, was when these individuals turn up to that thing, they basically get a series of information that was tailored to that kind of mental, social, physical, but it wasn't to the extent it was in that. It was a, here is some information, you've arrived at the site, there's some clues in amongst all of this for you to work out, etc. But yeah, there we go. But yeah, so keep to your vision. Don't let people badger you. Don't take those trolls to heart if you can. Do you know what? If I did it again and a troll came along and started giving, talking about things that weren't factual, I'd just give them the facts. Fuck it. Just turn around and say, no, you're incorrect because of these reasons. And then end conversation. Or, as I know a certain company does, just block them from your pages so they can't engage with your community. They can't drag your company through the mud, etc. Just flick and block them. Let them go and find somewhere else to have their pedestal to stand on and shout about it. Just fuck them off from your community. You're not beneficial to me. Right, bang, flick, you're gone. It's okay to get feedback. It's okay to get criticism. But when they are publicly attacking you, just flick, get rid, block. Simple. That's it. There you go. That's my advice. Get rid, flick them away. Let the troll go bother somebody else. So yeah, so hopefully you guys have gained something from this video. I'm going to say it was a difficult one for me because, it's personal, because it's dealing with people that I'm talking about, things that happen in the project where I'm dealing with friends and etc. But yeah, hopefully there's been some benefit from this, and hopefully when you're running your project that you have some better engagements than I did, and you don't make the same mistakes I did that will, trust me, cause you huge problems, not only during the project but after the project is finished. You know what I mean? So yeah, thank you everybody for joining, and I love you all. I'll see you all again soon. Bye.